say a very brief word. Tenement is a fledgling organisation, collective, conglomerate of like-minded folks that we've been kind of building ourselves way through the last 18 months, which have been wilderness years. And increasingly, I thought that there's one line from the first book we published, John Ross's The Tumbler, that kind of serves as something as a manifesto for the press, which is just one line. So I unfold a map of the world in the rain. And I realize increasingly that the books that we publish through Tenement respond to this brief in some way, shape, or form, and are trying to engage this idea from its various angles. So I will say little else, but we have 3 readings that will be from books that are scattered across the year, where we will begin with Steve Fowler and his MUEUM, that we'll speak to, followed by Kyra from PALACE of RUBBLE, and then end with Cristina, who will read from Pasolini's Rabbia, which we'll publish with the press in December. So, enough from me.
So nice to be here. I love intimacy. Nothing is better. We're all nice and close to each other. Let's make it even worse. Let's get even closer, spiritually and psychologically. Thank you so much for having us at this amazing book fair. So nice to see so many friends. Thanks, Simon. Thank you, Dominic. Publishing MUEUM. This is the 4th launch, 5th launch of the novella. I can't keep count. What a good job he does. It makes me think so ill of all the other publishers I've worked with. Well done. Okay. I'm just going to read 5 minutes from the novella. Nothing else. I won't do anything else. I reach the trio and sweep the man's hand away in one forceless motion. He falls, and his hands land loudly on the ceramic floor, stopping his face. His hand was so open, it doesn't close and breaks his fall. Must have slapped there. Like a stiff body falling into water. No other visitors want to look like they notice. The man is alone, and even his children step away. I often say the public don't notice me, but they know who I am in the galleries. That's why, deep down, I like it when they touch. We all have a dark heart. I've lost my place. It's quite deep down. I like it. We all have a dark heart. The man is crouched. I grab his collar and drag him into himself, bending him. My legs stepped deep into a squat beside his back. He tumbles and bumps into a squat beside. He tumbles and bumps into the boys like a collapsing building. And losing my place. They collide with each other, and onto their father, the man tries to stop splaying, taking great handfuls of his children as he does. There is no expression of anger on his face. No report is coming. I'm sorry, I just need to use the bathroom. No report is coming. Start the taps on.
Start the taps.
Taps going, no report is coming. Someone comes back into no report is coming. However, his mouth is opening, and he's beginning to speak as I reach down to take a handful of his head, put him back to his feet, where I suppose I might drive his face into Anubis's to show him which will relent first, the old stone or the new visitor. I might not, though. I think I'll find out at the top as I reach down. There's no words on that, that's unfortunate. As I reach down, is this attached to the wall? As I reach down, I feel a touch upon my bicep. As I feel a touch upon my bicep. Oh, come on. Upon my bicep, and I'm instantly relieved. I turn to face the curator, who looks at me, his hand passive in its control upon my arm. Oh, yes, that's so good that I didn't even plan for that. Oh, as I turn to face the curator, who looks down at me, his hand passive in its control upon my arm, his face perfectly gentle, he's betrayed by an almost impossible doubtness. You must not touch them, he says disdainfully, and nods at the forward man. I am sorry, I reply, unsurprised. Please come in. You're missing nothing. I maybe lose my place, though. That's not your fault. It's just the way the brain works. I am sorry, I reply. They get alarmed, he unreasonably insists. The father, the other way, still not fully righted, is helped up by his wife, and they all hasten on, making the end of the Coptic corridor, half crawling, simmering into the masses who do not want to know. They rush down the first few drops of the north stairs, out towards Asia, likely to touch the treasures there when suitably recovered. There are new rules on the new levels. Some things can be fondled. The thought of their grubbing flashes across my mind. That with the general feeling of discontent and nausea becomes a disregard that makes me temporarily forgetful of the silent wonder expected towards a curator. I speak again, maintaining a tone of mediation while doing something I've never seen anyone do before. If I cannot touch them, how are we supposed to stop them touching? I've always wanted to ask that question. The curator breaks contact with me. If it was possible, he looked downcast, as though he were now facilitating words between Dogface and I, like Anubis, had interjected on my behalf. Or as if he didn't know the answer. Thank you so much.
This first one is called Today Clouds. Like other places, there are areas of fog, and sometimes a little turmoil in the market. The buildings are old, doors creak on their hinges, accidents happen in the spring. Kings break their hips while elephant hunting, as fortunes spin from the wheels of young maidens. In the afternoon, 2 children play outside an abandoned house. Their dolls long decapitated, they arrange pieces of trash on the sidewalk, constructing their own tiny world on the ground. Its territory is already mapped out by the fading chalk outlines of missing people. Here, a blank square of sidewalk becomes an open field, an empty pastry bag, a great white mansion. All is in miniature, inanimate specks fading into a voluminous backdrop of orange sky. The children drag sticks across the pavement, as if marching drones through the little town they've imagined, past the monuments of discarded bottles and shards of glass. They control everything, down to the weather, pouring water over the town for days of flooding, tilting magnifying glasses over rooftops to zap out unworthy citizens. Still in all, it has been a day for rookies, a day for running amok. Just off a main highway that stretches east of them and slices through a moonscape of craggy slopes, teenagers play with guns in the idle mountains, dropouts fulfilling a century-old dream of taking to the hills. Many of them live in the trailers dotting the hillside, where they spend their nights studying video game ninjas. Inside the abandoned house, a substitute teacher tries to adjust to daylight saving time. His kitchen is full of substitute ingredients: honey instead of sugar, water instead of milk, a single plank of wood where the bed should be, made for a man in place of another. He scrawls out a lesson plan for his next day of work, in which the few students he has left will be asked to contemplate one question: where does inspiration originate? The substitute looks up at the tiny cracks of light, flickering like stars through the boards nailed over the windows. He remembers staring into a lamp store in Chinatown once, a gallery of lights all blinking in dissonant rays of color. But here, there's nothing but scrub brush for miles into the distance, as if some enterprising tycoon has made off with all the rest. The weather vane on the roof turns slowly on chicken feet as he peers through that same point of light in the window, thoughts shattered by the dropout boys shooting their guns into the air. A gust of wind blows a fleet of plastic bags past the house. Today, clouds, says one of the children outside, cueing the orchestra for the next great calamity. Okay, the next one is called Still Life with Parrot. His death is announced Tuesday, the same day he is buried in the village, the day of the great race. A day for bicycles to speed past maps of the universe sagging on walls, held up by women still trapped in romanticism, searching other planets for signs of a second bloom. Dogs have long proved useful in detecting explosives or to find bodies left by crime or disaster. but rarely do they find the men that are most missed. Housewives have waited for them through many long centuries, propelled by an idleness that turns the mind savage. But the man who died on Tuesday was the sort that stays behind, a portrait painter, bound to the interior. His were the great adventures of sitting in chairs, searching the lines of faces for an era that flees from us, wobbling away in cattle trucks, sleeping in folds of sheep. The sheets of the painter's deathbed are marked with stray colors. He was often caught carrying his paintbrush with him through dreams. Now he moves it through the air of his last breath, painting one final invisible picture on the wall that stands between the world of waking and sleep. I have an alliance with the woman across the street, says the painter. She sells curiosities. She dotes on shrunken heads, tending her loneliness with a passion for objects. We speak in distant gestures, but have never exchanged words. She leans from the window, and I paint her gorilla forearms into the scenes on my canvas. When we finally meet each other, I will say, let us forget ourselves, leave for the sad tropics, where the monkeys will add us to a menagerie of strange creatures, perhaps one day to be sold in your shop. And from her perch across the way, as though she has somehow heard his call, the woman takes a stuffed parrot from its glass cage and fastens it to a branch outside her window. Your words are only sketches, she says, letting go of the bird, beginning as one thing, then turning into another. A line is at one end the spine of a book, and at the other, the string to a disappearing balloon. These conversations will fly off, like smoke into the dark. Love can do the same. As a ray of sun falls across the floor, the man drops his paintbrush, having gripped it in his fingers for the last time. Of all things, the bicycles still brush away. They ride past ancient icebergs melting into floods, through fields of made-up flowers that won't grow back. The parrot flies after them without word. And I'll just read one more. This one's called Blue Moon. The encounter is always breathtakingly brief. Young and alone, they ride to the border on the roofs of freight trains or the backs of buses. They cross the river on inner tubes or hike for days through extremes of heat and chill in the deserts. Death comes as a surprise to many, to quiet men with the hearts of engineers, to doctors with secrets of the world's demise, to the unexpected surge of children who travel here without parents, as if hoping to arrive at a sea of tranquility. A storm threatens the last stretch of railroad, winding through mountains of hazardous waste as it approaches the damsel tied to the tracks. There she lies, having survived a summer of flitting through narrow corridors, waiting limp-wristed in greenhouses for the thrill of a billionaire or lunar eclipse. Her thoughts are an index of topics memorized for conversational luncheons, notes on the atmosphere and the end of a tumultuous and consequential decade. These things wander her mind out of place, like non-native birds drifting in from the sea. We still have time to tell the story of the last she begins, but is interrupted by the immeasurable speed at which love can strike. It flies over town like a passing comet, bystanders falling to their knees on the sidewalk below. Cries of awe echo through the streets, ricocheting between buildings as if the shards of a fallen meteor. But there are still those who avert their eyes. We've lost our ability to capture information, says the billionaire, peering through the blinds as a lovesick eagle falls past its window. The train approaches, a child or two hanging tight to its roof. The last thought to race through the damsel's head is of the first human to set foot on the moon, bounding like a kangaroo through the low lunar gravity. His shadow falls over craters still seen with the naked eye, a single flag fluttering in the celestial wind around him. That moment may turn out to be the pinnacle of humanity's achievement, says the billionaire, recalling the same image from the place where he stands, knowing that success is bound irrevocably to the rubble in its wake. The billionaire's window glows blue through the evening, all lights but the television gone from the room. Sometimes I feel like I'm not sure I have the ability, if I've ever really truly loved anyone, or if I've ever really been loved, says a voice on the screen where two people lay in bed playing out the last scene of a marriage. In the original, it's the woman who says this. In the remake, it's the man. The train turns the bend and continues on in blind orbit, jolting over whatever it must.
Thanks everyone for being here. Don't publishing this book. I'm all the more pleased to be reading this today, which is the official 100th anniversary of the sadly successful media operation that was called the March on Rome. We are publishing the translation of Pasolini's La Rabbia, a film called Anger. This is a transcript of a text that he was asked to write as a commentary, a compilation of newsreel that in his hands turned into something quite different. A wonderful poem. It's very difficult to choose some of the sequences from all the ones that we have, but I think I'll start with one that gives us an idea of the core theme of the book and also of a subject that through all of these years of neocon rule has almost become a taboo subject, not quite. This is a text spoken over images of an atomic explosion. Captions. Dreams of death, drivel of maggots in eternity. Our children, the mothers were monsters. Slow fatalities coming to a head outside the world. Convolutions of a will that makes of itself a monument on the summit of the oceans. Will that has no memories. There's nothing left, nothing. We have never existed. Reality is these shapes on the summit of the heavens. Class struggle, reason for every war. Subtle forms of cancer, weapons of class struggle. Tender green shoots of the plague, weapons of class struggle. Vicious hissing of the defensive witchman. Cream of blood of the offensive poor man. Bourgeois brain devoid of the idea of class struggle. Heart benighted by the mystery of no idea of class struggle. Lids of the terror that rules the world. Mange-ridden roses of the war, sown by class struggle. The newsreels, I should add, span a shortish period from roughly the end of the Second World War to the early 60s. But looking at watching the film and hearing the bombs, it's like panning through the whole century because of this death of the gays and because of the truth of this empathy. Another sequence is called The Weight of War. Ashes being returned from Greece, which is a reference, of course, to the ill-fated 1940 campaign of what was then known as the Royal Italian Army. In third class, in cheap wooden boxes on Royal Armed Forces trucks, our last fellow citizens return. Boys of no account who harnessed like laborers were taken to their death, perhaps singing pop songs. Of no account in life, no account in death, a benediction on the journey out and one on the return. Inside those small boxes, the returning boy doesn't know that by now he's a useless martyr and that pity is a lie. Of no account in life, no account in death, a true train for the journey out, a third-class funeral for the return. And scientists with no light, generals with no soul, served by the youngest brother of the dead. Once again, they are training to kill some coppice woods in Europe. Should the colorless innocence of mild winters. War in Korea. If war starts up again, whose fault is it? Oh, the sins of poor people, clearly. God punishes the Sodoms of rags, Gomorrahs of poverty, the racing of down-heel love. The rich also die, of course, but they die for something, and that something is the fury that turns the world into its own opposite, a red-hot ruin, a darkness with no end. They're all Koreans. You too were in this life, ignored, because we, the rich, ignore poverty, and our excuse is distance. Almost as if distance could heal all evils, and the last horizon we're home to men dragged along by heavy lives like beavers and backups. There were millions of men like us, and so as to know you, we needed to know you at war. To know you clothed like beggars in army rags, to know you as inferior and superior, martyrs and torturers, fascists and communists like us. Over there, where the horizon is not enough to let life be just life. There is something for which the fault is laid on you, you humble ants driven out of your wits, millions of small corpses, and our boys too would be called Koreans, boys from poor families, that is. And in my country too, that's called Italy, the last prisoners return. A dozen men whose faces showed bones made of desiccated chalk, dressed in the clothes worn by children of poor people or sick people. They too are humble Koreans, with mothers and wives whose grief won't cease with their return on a rainy day in the station. In my country, it's called Italy. Algeria, and here you will recognize the famous French poem that not casually this piece reprizes. On my filthy rags and my skeletal nakedness, on my mother the gypsy, on my father the herder, I write your name. My first brother the raider, my second brother the cripple, my third brother the shoeblack, on my fourth brother the beggar, I write your name. On my hoodlum comrades, on my kept man comrades, on my out-of-work comrades, on my labourer comrades, I write your name, freedom. And this time I will finish with a short extract from the Marilyn sequence, the wonderful lyrical sequence here, dedicated to Marilyn Monroe. Of the ancient world and the future world, nothing was left but beauty. And you, poor little sister, you wore the beauty humbly, and your soul, the soul of a daughter of poor people, never knew possessed it, or it wouldn't have been beauty. It vanished like a golden mist. The world taught it to you, and so the beauty was no longer beauty. Of the stupid ancient world and the brutal future world, what was left was a beauty unashamed of hinting at the small sisterly breasts, the small belly so easily laid bare. And for this it was beauty, the same as that of the sweet girls of your world, daughters of colored immigrants, the daughters of poor Europe, the salesmen's daughters who win beauty contests in London or Miami. It vanished like a little golden dove. And now you are first. You, the younger sister, the one of no account, poor little thing with her smile. You are first beyond the gates of the world, abandoned to its doom.